In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Christ is risen.
He is risen.
About 20 years ago, when I was in Ethiopia, I happened to be sitting on a bench and reading a book called On Being a Christian. And an older woman walked by who I knew, a very wise old woman walked by, and she saw the book and looked at me and she said, "Haven't you got that figured out yet? On being a Christian. Haven't you got that figured out yet?" And it struck me when she said it that I hadn't gotten it figured out yet. And perhaps the author of the book hadn't gotten it figured out yet. The book was 600, 700, 800 pages long on being a Christian. If I had it figured out at that point, or if I at least had known how to respond, I may have simply responded with the first words of the gospel today, where Jesus said, "A commandment I give you, that you love one another." And that's a true answer, the truest answer that could be given. But it also raises the question, what does it mean to love one another? That is perhaps a harder question than what does it mean to be a Christian? Most of us could answer, a Christian is one who loves. But what does that mean? It's very difficult to know what love means. And indeed, when we hear in the gospel Jesus warning his disciples that the world will hate them, right after he said that they are ones who are to be characterized by love, I think it's because the world doesn't know what love is. And so the only response that the world can have to those who love one another is to hate them. But indeed, it is hard to know what it means to love one another. This is one of the reasons why God has given us the saints to venerate in the church. Because the saints, like St. Nicholas, our patron, whom we are celebrating today, whose relics, his body, was taken from the east to the west. It's now in Bari in Italy. St. Nicholas and all the saints show us what it means to be a Christian, therefore what it means to love. They show us in real time, in real actions, not just in words, not just in ideas, but in deeds. And we can look to all of the saints for this kind of inspiration. Many of the early fathers talk about the spiritual life as being like the life of a bee that is flying from one flower to the next, getting different kinds of pollen, taking it back to its home, and turning it into sweet, beautiful honey. All these flowers, the fathers say, are like all the different saints that God has raised up in the world. All of them have a sort of different fragrance about them, a different kind of pollen. Some saints are known for being very meek, very humble. Some saints are known for being very courageous in the face of opposition, like the martyrs who were unwilling to renounce their faith, even if it meant losing their life or being hurt. Some saints are known for being wise teachers, great theologians, perhaps not as patient as others, but able to teach others. Some were known as having great self-control, able to keep their emotions in check, always submitting to God. Some were known as being people who could pray all night and pray for others. Some were even able to heal others. St. Nicholas was known most for his mercy towards the needy, saving the poor, giving to them, and often giving to them in a way that they didn't know that it was him. So he was meek, he was generous, he had mercy. And this is what we celebrate when we celebrate the movement of his relics, that this mercy, this holiness, ultimately this love has not been stopped by the fact that St. Nicholas died in the flesh 1,600 years ago. That he is in the presence of God, that his life continues to instruct us. He fulfills for us what is written in the scriptures, that love is stronger than death. When the saints die, they only seem to die. Their love, their mercy, their holiness, whatever their virtue happens to be, continues to instruct us. They continue to love us even after they have passed on from this life. And so someone like Nicholas, who is loved around the world as a saint, even his bones are a cause for celebration. The fact that they were moved across the sea from one place to another is a cause for us to celebrate, because his love, his holiness, his mercy continues to instruct us. So if we ask ourselves the question, and we should perhaps ask it every single day, what does it mean to be a Christian? Ask yourself, have I figured that out yet? And if you haven't, and none of us have fully, remember these words of Jesus. They look to the saints, especially our patron Saint Nicholas, to instruct us on what that means. So what it means to love. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Christ is risen.
Indeed he is risen.